Well, African nations could miss national target to curb greenhouse gas emissions unless rich countries stop using them as dumping grounds for millions of polluting old cars. Analysts at the just-ended Global Climate Action Conference are issuing this warning. My colleague Justice Beidou attended the conference as a fellow of the International Center for Journalists and has just returned. He joins me in the studio for some analysis. Justice, tell us what happened at this conference.
Yes, so this was a gathering of over 4,000 delegates, global leaders, presidents, and climate action activists from all around the world, sounding what they say is a warning that climate change would be the defining issue going into the next couple of years, and it's an issue that everybody around the world should take seriously, and especially countries in developing places around the world like Ghana. And one of the key issues that came up was many of the Western countries are now speaking about how they are phasing out vehicles that emit a lot of dangerous carbons, and so people are now looking to issue a place like using electric cars and all of that. And the concerns are that once they are phasing these cars out, they are now going to be damned in places like Africa. And so one of the people who raised this alarm and called on world leaders is the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who made a serious case out of this. So we could listen to him and say what he...
Leaders of the world need to step up. The private sector, of course, is poised to move, and many are doing so. But the lack of decisive government action is causing uncertainty in the markets and concern about the future of the Paris Agreement. We can't let this happen. The world's richest nations are the most responsible for the climate crisis, yet the effects are being felt first and worst by the poorest nations and the most vulnerable peoples and communities. We already see this injustice in the incessant and increasing cycle of extreme droughts and ever more powerful storms. Women and girls in particular will pay the price, not only because their lives will become harder, but because in times of disaster, women and girls always suffer disproportionately. Richer nations must therefore not only cut their emissions, but do more to ensure that the most vulnerable can develop the necessary resilience to survive the damage these emissions are causing. We have the moral and economic incentives to act. What is still missing, still even after Paris, is the leadership and the sense of urgency and true commitment to a decisive multilateral response.
That's the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres there, Justice. So when you were there, and we're wrapping up with this question, did you get the sense that really the message of the climate change and the necessary steps that have to be taken have really trickled down to the people, whose actions and inactions contribute to this?
I think, and this is one of the concerns that was raised there, like the climate action conversation seemed only to be at the top. And so you find that big organizations, big corporations, global leaders are at this level having this conversation. The problem, though, is that the worst affected people are not participating and are not really, when I mean say participation in terms of real action. So, for example, recent report has shown that there are about 2 billion vehicles globally. We have about 2% of that, translating to about 40 million, being on-road worthy, which means then that they are vehicles.
Because my concern is whether or not there were thoughts about how to deal with that. I mean, deal with trickling down the message.
Yes,
and making sure that it works.
And dealing with that means participation by the people who are most affected. Right. The strange thing is that you find that there were not a lot of African representation. We didn't have a lot of heads of state from the continent. What you find is more of Western corporations and organizations and leaders rather talking about how they are going to cut their emissions and protect their countries and all of that. And so the call is that there should be more action, especially from the people who are most affected, i.e. African countries, Asian countries that are most affected by some of these. We just saw videos of floods and all of that.
Justice, thank you very much, and welcome back from San Francisco.